Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning to all the participants and attendees here. So to begin with, I will quickly let you all get introduced to AMP. That is Association of Muslim Professionals. Can you all see my screen? Okay. So,
Yes.
okay. So I welcome all of you to AMP Web Talk. And about AMP, that is Association of Muslim Professionals, I would like to tell you that it was registered in India and USA as a non-profitable organization. AMP has completed its 12 years, Alhamdulillah, and serving our community in the field of education, employment, and empowerment. AMP has a vision to positively impact lives of 10 million people by 2030. We have a mission to empower Muslims for the greater benefit of the society in general and nation as a whole. AMP's vision is to be a model Muslim community which is advanced in education, socially progressive, culturally vibrant, politically influential, economically dynamic. So on my screen you can see all the achievements so far of AMP. You can quickly go through the slide. We have skill development lectures, job fairs and drives, higher education scholarships, career counseling sessions, and renowned educationalists connected and awards also. So we have online presence of 125 lakhs plus members and professionals. And on ground, we have 100 plus active chapters, which are spread across 19 states and 16 countries. We also have 5,000 plus active members. And if anyone wants to connect to us and become a member of AMP, he or she can join us by visiting this link, which is on my screen, and also can write to us at info@ampindia.org. So now I would like to introduce you to the speaker of the day, Mr. Adil Masood, who is a technologist by passion, who works as a R&D leader at IMEC, which is a nanoelectronics research center in Belgium. And now I request Mr. Adil to please take it further from here. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Adab or namaste. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. It might sound strange, but I'm not very used to of Zoom. And in these days of lockdown, if you do not know how to use any of these services, then you're already in a pickle. But starting from this pickle, thank you, Humera, for introducing me. And I have to. Can you guys hear me clearly? Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I'll just start directly from what we are here for. Let me share my screen. And yeah. Okay, so the topic today is career in high tech. And there are lots of questions right from the beginning that what exactly is high tech, what career paths we are talking about. It's a very large topic, and it's impossible to put it together in half hour or an hour. But the objective here is not to give an exhaustive tour de force of all high tech industry and the career options. But to give a small glimpse of what exactly high-tech industry is and what career options you can imagine in this field. So let's start from really a prehistorical time, right? The Stone Age. If you look at this stone, it is one of the oldest stone tool found at least 26 lakh year old ago. I mean, that's when this stone tool was made, and pretty much at the beginning of humanity. And then it took another 8 lakh years to have that stone technology upgrade to what you see now, the Acheulean stone tools. So the progress of technology at the very beginning of humanity was obviously quite slow, and it has kept picking speed, but not so fast. It took another 18 lakh years before we could figure out how we can put a stick with a stone and make an axe. But this painful, slow uh, progress of technology was what we have lived through. But if you just talk about more recent times, let's say the 21st century or late 20th and 21st century, then the first properly workable commercial mobile was released in 1983 by Motorola. It took 9 years to have another major upgradation when Nokia came up with their more compact phones. Took another 8 years to have first phone with camera with I think just zero point 0.1 megapixel, and then another 5 years to have all multimedia system in your phone. And within 2 years you had iPhone. I'm not counting from iPhone onwards because pretty much all smartphones tend to take the same path. But if you just look at this expansion of technology, it's incredible. While we have moved from a handheld rock to an X over 26 lakh year, um, this sweep was barely in 25 years. So what is about technology? Man as an ingenious creature has always been striving to upgrade and its living by changing the surrounding, hacking everything around him or her, and putting it for some use. But that has always driven technology, but not like it does now. So the technological progress now is exponential. An exponential term uh, seems to be entering into jargon lately a lot, unfortunately, because of the COVID crisis. So most people are familiar with what exactly exponential is. But when we talk about how technology has progressed in last 70, 80 years, um, then these numbers become really incomprehensible, as we will see. So that's what my pitch is. Technology changes, it progresses, and it is progressing faster than ever. Are we ready for it? Especially from the point of view of our careers and what path we would like to uh, put forward to fully capitalize on this changing technological scenario. So a quick introduction. Um, well, my name is Adil Masood, obviously. Um, I I studied in Cochin University of Science and Technology for a course called Integrated MSc in Photonics, and that's where I really got into technology. Photonics was a new field. What photonics is, we'll come to that later on, but it's basically light, technology of light. And then I pursued my career as a researcher in Ghent University in Belgium, where I was trying to pursue my PhD. I say trying because it did not finish. Nevertheless, I worked as an R&D consultant for a Belgian company and eventually moving to IMEC in Belgium, which is a nanoelectronics research center, one of its kind and one of the biggest in the world. So I'm very much involved in high-tech industry for last 12 years continuously. And whatever I'm going to present to you is on the basis of my experience and whatever I have gathered as an insider of this high-tech industry. I'm definitely not a career counselor. Um, I have lost a lot of grip from what's happening in academia in terms of how to secure admission, how to find a good university. So what you expect from this webinar and what you do not can be summarized like this, that I aim to tell you that why technology is relevant now more than ever, and especially for industry. Uh, I'm going to clarify what is high tech and why it is different from technology. How come it's not just a cool word to add in front of technology to make it sound, more fancy? Not at all. What kind of jobs exist in high tech industry? Is it like a very monolithically um, typical scientists working in high tech industry, or people like Elon Musk or Sergey Brin working in high-tech industry? There are lots of it's not so clear if you see from outside this industry, because it's not that big. It's comparatively small and kind of elusive for people from outside this industry. So that's where I will be banking on my experiences to tell that how does it feel to work in a high-tech industry. And then I do have some tips that how to get started for a career in high tech. As I said, I'm not aiming to provide a career counseling on this issue. Though, to be honest, the webinar title indeed said careers. So, but my intentions will be to inspire and give clues and cues to people to look more seriously towards high tech industry as a career option. And if I succeed in that, um, that will be great. The other great details about which university to apply, how, when, how to score in a test, how to prepare, internet is full of that. And I can help in providing links related to that, but that will come with the slides which will be provided to you later on. So I already covered what this webinar does not aim to tell. It's not telling a very specific path. Um, the logistics, the technical, it's simply no time to cover that part. And frankly, I'm also not an expert in that. So we begin with a story. So we left our initial discussion on exponential things. What is exponential? So it is said that chess was invented in our country, and uh, once, it's probably a myth or a legend, but the story goes that the chess maker went to the king, and king, being happy with that chess maker, said, "You can have whatever you want." And the chess maker said that, "Okay, I'll just have some grain of rice, but in a particular order where you double the number of rice on every column, just like what you can see on the screen." To the king, it sounded very simple. There could be only two meaning. Um, if it was considered just linear, which means number of grains are increased for every square, um, all over 64 squares, then that should be some number of grains. But what king did not know that this number of grains actually adds up exponentially. So which means if the first square have one grain, the second one two, and four, and eight, and 16, and so on, um, that number has got to be larger than the linear calculation. But how large? And that's when it turned out that if you actually do the summation, by the time you reach to the 64th square, um, it's about 1.8 lakh crore grains. So that's a big number. It's almost 1,500 times of the global rice production right now. So obviously the king could not reward the chess maker properly. And that's because the chess maker was smart, knowing what exponential word means. Why it is important for technology? And I've been using this word like an adjective over and over again. But when it comes to science and technology, this word and has actual meaning, a mathematical meaning, not just a metaphorical big adjective. And that is a driving force for how technology is transforming our world. So uh, the bottom line is that exponential growth is incredibly faster than the linear growth. And it applies to something very at the very heart of today's technological revolution we live in. My background is largely in photonics, so you can say applied electronics and applied physics. So if I keep most of the examples from my field, I do not mean any offense to someone coming from the other fields of technology, particularly bio. Uh, but having said that, I can say quite um, convincingly that Moore's law is at the very heart of what we witness all around us. It's not a law like a physics or chemistry or like a law of nature, but it was just a prediction by one of the by one of the leading researchers, and who was very much involved with the invention of integrated circuits and transistors, who predicted that number of transistors on a chip will become twice every 2 years. What does that mean? To reduce it to a more simplified language, computing power of any device, whether it is your mobile, your laptop, or your drone, anything, its computing power can broadly be correlated with how many transistors the microprocessor of the device has. Um, and what is this transistor? It's the most basic electronic device which is used in digital electronics to pretty much build any kind of circuitry, to do any kind of functions. And there's a whole you can it's it would be fair to say that transistors are the fundamental building blocks of all modern integrated electronics. And this was what you see on the screen. This was the size of the first integrated circuit with one transistor in 1958. Then, over the years, the number of transistors on chip kept increasing from just one transistor in 1950s, pretty much following exponential law, going to uh, almost a billion transistors by the time we uh, turn to the new century. And now it's really measured in number of billions. And why does it matter? More transistors in a chip means more power. And as you can see that the way number of transistors have increased, that does not relate linearly. It's not like that you had now twice the number of transistors. They really increase at an incredible speed. And it's when it is plotted, this graph is very interesting because you are all familiar with uh, i- all the Intel processors, especially in 2000s and late 90s, with the Pentium 1, Pentium 2, Pentium 3, all of them coming with more and more number of transistors in same area. So if you plot number of transistors over years, you see that the graph goes logarithmically. It looks linear here because if you look at the y-axis where the transistors are, uh, the number is increasing exponentially, really. That's why the curve is straight. So you can see like from 1950s, 60s with just one transistors, now, well, in 2000, it's already in billions. So fair to say that the computing power has increased in terms of billions. Now this is not the very basis of technological revolution we live in, but it broadly symbolizes that why the technological revolution is exponential. Um, and there's a much bigger story why it happened. It's not really that somebody predicted and that's why it happened. But we won't go into the larger story of that. The point over here is to say that the technological growth is exponential. And that has, of course, transformed the economy in every way. Uh, very good example is to compare that which companies were the biggest companies in the United States 100 years ago and what is the scenario right now. So if you look at this data from uh, it compares the most valuable companies in the United States in 1917. Now, some of the names will sound familiar, some of them not. But if you just look at it, there is barely one company which you can really count as technology, and that is American AT&T. Other than that, the list was dominated by what is called a really conventional industries like steel, petroleum, and textile, agricultural equipments. If you move 50 years ahead, and then you see that already IBM and AT&T, which by that time was really into core technologies, are now two companies in this list. Now, what does that mean? It does not show any pattern now at this moment, but if you fast forward it to 2017, you see that the five most valuable companies are all tech companies. You don't see heavy names anymore in top 10 list. And the same applies if you go to Forbes list for Fortune 500, Fortune 100. You will see that the technology companies are becoming more and more um, giants in and covering, and their revenues are becoming much larger than conventional industry. This is not a coincidence, and it is not because uh, technology products sell very well or something like that. The reason behind this is that the whole economy has moved to higher dependence on technology. Computer technology or information technology is not just used in software companies. Even a petroleum company will have a very large infrastructure for IT. They will require very high quality maintenance and applications all over their network to run smoothly. And that's the reason why technology companies have risen to this level. There's another chart, I'll just quickly go through it, that if you compare the most valuable companies in just 2006 uh, compared to what we have in 2016, you see that while it was only Microsoft, which was in 2006 at the third rank, now top five companies out of top six companies are all tech based. So these, I hope I convinced you enough that technology is in industry itself, it is spreading and bringing more dependence on it itself than what industry used to have on conventional fields. So economy is increasingly technology driven. It already is, and going to get a lot more technological. And some people put it as a dawn of fourth industrial revolution. It's a nice way to categorize past and attach numbers or versions to it. But what exactly is Industry 4.0? It's not just a fancy word. There is a lot of substance in classifying our recent history in terms of major technological impacts on society and how society coped with it. It'll get better if you look at this example that if this is what is going to get started is Industry 4.0. So let's start from Industry 1.0. And that's when the world got industrialized for the first time. That's when steam engines were, the power of steam was discovered. Steam engines were built for locomotion as well as for running hand looms, for running factories. That was for the first time that humanity moved away from manual labors of humans and animals and took the very first steps towards having machine do our work. This was in 1784, the year they pin for the first beginning of industry. I don't know why exactly this year, but around that time, of course, steam energy based industry started popping up, starting from US, starting from UK, but it's spreading all over Europe, Americas, and of course all over Asia. Industry 2.0 is when humanity discovered another power, the power of electrical power, and also some nice ideas to do mass production in assembly line. That was also a killer idea. And the whole story about how Model T of Ford really reinvented how industry should be run. And there are lots of anecdotes about it. But the main thing was that we found ourselves capable of tapping another resource of nature. And voila, we had Industry 2.0. Industry 3.0 uh, you can say, started coming into existence, when automation increased. That pretty much happened parallelly with rise of personal computing and computing in general, and that has led to eventually personal computing, and finally leading to internet, and now the world we live in. It was the beginning of information revolution, and that was what Industry 3.0. So what's happening now, which is not on this screen? Uh, have you found something else other than internet? Not really, but we have found a way to connect everything. Just uh, less than 10 years ago, it was inconceivable to imagine that small devices can be connected to internet, like your mobile or your smartwatch. Uh, but this rapid exponential change in technology, where things are getting smaller and smaller with more power into smaller devices, we have came to the point where we go for more convergence and go for what is called Industry 4.0, which is not just based on physical equipment placement and applications, but also uses uh, its connectivity for its advantage. Here, the connectivity is not just limited to humans connecting to a machine, but universally machines connecting to machines and communicating with each other. Many people use the word Internet of Things, which is a very clever name, because it's no more just Internet of computers, where you go for a very specific purpose to your computer. Now your mobile is way powerful computer than what we had just a couple of decades ago. So why not these devices, these things, be connected with each other? And that leads to a very new range of possibilities. It really not only changes our day-to-day lifestyle, where we depend on so much on these devices, but also it transforms the way industry works in manufacturing and in production. So its impact is quite large. But let's go further deep into what Industry 4.0 is. There are few sets of technologies or domains which are often linked with what Industry 4.0 is. There are no consensus. If you check literature, you look around on internet, you will find that every other article seems to have a different uh, list of what they term as pillars of industry. Obviously, these lists largely overlap. So here I have just picked up one such list, and we will go through some of the key technologies over there. So do not take these things or these classifications as something written on a stone. These classifications, this narrative is just to understand it better. So carrying on from here, what are the pillars of industry? Let's focus on some of them. What here he talks about. Going through all of them will be difficult, but the one which immediately comes to our mind is cognitive computing, or largely related words we hear from it. Excuse me, like using artificial neural networks, or replicating neural computing for actually artificial systems, artificial intelligence, and a whole range of possibilities are out there. Hollywood has made quite a lot of money showing what AI would be. But in reality, well, how AI, artificial intelligence, will be uh, is a completely different topic. But what's happening right now is not that a Terminator style Skynet is getting switched on and destroying everything, or holding humanity on ransom. Uh, Machine learning and big data is providing enough material to be analyzed through algorithms which are now capable of running on the computers we have. Or let me put it like this: now we have good enough computers to run these algorithms, which use computational system not like the way computers traditionally use, but they let me put this word cautiously, they think the way human minds or any brain thinks. So there's a big difference between computing and I think there was a web talk a couple of months ago from AMP, where the speaker has gone into great detail talking about automotive retail sector um, and about the jobs of tomorrow and focused on artificial intelligence and but this is really going to change things because here computers are changing and it's already happening. You may not have a walking talking robot, but we already have computer programs running on our mainframes which can analyze great deal of data, intuitively find patterns just like humans, and give kind of results which we have never expected before. A very famous example is when top surgeons, top cancer specialists were pitted against some of the uh, artificial neural network algorithms to go through X-rays and other diagnostic data of patients and recognize whether is suffering from cancer or not. I'm probably putting it too lightly. It was probably more complicated than that. But in essence, this was the thing. And machines tend to be performing much better than actual highly experienced and qualified surgeons. So we are on the brink of teaching machines how to think. And that is the very gist of Industry 4.0. We are right at the beginning of it, and that's why the first pillar I went to right ahead was cognitive computing. There are other interesting things also. Internet of Things. It's a very interesting topic, very fascinating. It basically go to a level where pretty much everything in your day-to-day life is has enough computing power and connectivity with rest of the things so that you can seamlessly work with technology. Stuff like that your refrigerator communicating to your, let's say, grocery list, that the milk is running out. And for that, you need a sensor system and a computational system in your fridge, and its connectivity to your, let's say, your mobile, so that you get an SMS that you have to buy milk before you get back home. It's just an example, but you can think of anything, everything connect, and it already started. Every time you put on a smart watch and go out for a run, your watch is talking to your mobile is talking to the cloud, and so on and so forth. Uh, Onboard computers on cars are already there. There are onboard small computers on cycles, bicycles. So Internet of Things expects to connect as many devices as possible with the internet and a network of its own. I'll just rush through this. There are many other technologies also. 3D printing, it's improving rapidly, and we see all kind of interesting applications coming out of it. And of course, cyber security. With so much data and internet, how to protect it. It's not just computer or programming related things. There are, for example, even research projects where quantum computing is, quantum encryption is being considered to do encryption peer to peer. And it's a completely different game. It's a completely different kind of approach to secure your online data. So moving further, just to conclude this slide, that fourth industrial revolution is starting, and we better catch this train. Now, coming to more career aspect path of this talk, uh, we are basically focusing on science, engineering, and technology, often famous as a abbreviation for STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And lately, people advocate that we need not to leave art outside to it. So STEAM. By art, especially if we are using in a very Indian educational perspective, then it pretty much covers subjects related to humanities, languages, and often social sciences. So again, none of these words are written in stone. Let's go with the spirit of what um, we are trying to discuss here. So, a quick definition uh, should be provided here to distinguish between science, engineering, and technology. These words are often used interchangeably, which is fine. I mean, you are doing bachelor in engineering or bachelor in technology. Often it is just used interchangeably. But for a more closer view and a more serious view, if you see, look at their distinction, it's really a different thing. And if you are interested in high-tech career, you should better get sorted about these definitions, because these are not just theoretical definitions, but also sets your larger agenda if you are in that field. So what is science? Uh, Books are written on what is science, what is philosophy of science, but let's compress it in a very simple thing. It's our attempts to understand nature. uh, we got to know why things are happening around us, and sometimes they are out there just for the joy of knowledge. But even if it is not joy of knowledge, even if it is not joy of very intrinsic human curiosity, uh, it is an important thing, because only when you understand nature, then you get the power to manipulate it and use it uh, for for the benefits of society, I hope. Um, but science, that's where it starts. Engineering is about designing products, but I'm not saying it with disdain. Actually, I'm saying it with a great, because it's really impressive that once you have figured out what laws of nature are, how can I engineer it? How can I manipulate it in a way that something good can be extracted for whatever goals I have set? That's the challenge for humanity, to look at things from engineering point of view. I'll expand on this in examples further on. But what is technology? So engineering finds a way how science can be utilized for creating something, any kind of product, application, anything. Uh, and whatever comes out of engineering, these products, how do they actually get applied to society and maintained and put together and deployed? That's what technology is. Now, that is just SET. Math is language of nature. So no matter what you do, mathematics is at the very core of it. Now, before I scare uh, 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 people that STEM necessarily or high tech industry or career necessarily involve too much mathematics, that's not what I mean to say. Uh, Mathematics, there is a joy in mathematics itself, but for just for STEM careers, there is a minimal level of mathematics required, but you need not to be Ramanujan to really work in that industry. Knowing maths is important because it is language of nature. It is important for anyone. But of course, it is central to science, engineering, and technology, because that's the language of communication there. No maths, no science, no technology, and no engineering. But then what about art, which is in a way language of humanity? Uh, Being a technologist myself, I have no shame in accepting that science, engineering, and technology as such are quite dry. I mean, they are super interesting, but they're quite dry because there is no human concern towards it in terms of why should we be doing that. And that's something maybe people in STEM need to pay more attention to, what is termed as art side, regarding the understanding of the humanity. Uh, you can create things from what science, engineering, and technology tells you, but for what purpose, for what ends? Are you going to research something which will benefit society or destroy it? What has been society's historical reaction towards consumerism, or when products got cheaper or easy to access, over exploitation of resources? all these things are more human concerns, usually covered by social sciences and humanities, and they do have place. They very much have place in high-tech industry, as we will see further. So now we are done with the definitions of STEM or STEAM. Uh, of course, high technology industry is mainly dominated by science, technology, and engineering graduates, and of course mathematics as well. But let's move further. So, what is how high is technology? Uh, why it is called high technology? So no, that's only a matter of definitions and classifications. Now, colloquially, we can call anything high technology. I'm sure. Uh, I'm sure Homo habilis would have found Acheulean stone tools 18 lakh year later and would have considered that stone as high technology. It's relative, but most of the major international bodies who are involved in trade or regulations, they do try to define or classify some of the industries as high tech compared to just as technology. Again, there are so many different classifications, and we just have to work with one of the structure, and so as to grasp an understanding what high technology is. So I will go for OECD definitions. Uh, they had a quite a long list and quite an obsession to define high technology in multiple layers: high technology, medium low technology, and low technology. What does it mean? Let's start from the low technology, and these definitions will start making sense. So, paper printing, textile, clothing, food, beverage, tobacco, wood, furniture. Of course, technology is at use there, but the very core basic of this industry is not technology, or maybe a little, but not high technology. It's not exponentially changing. The quality of paper has not changed dramatically uh, over, well, probably in last 2000 years, yes, since its invention, but not in last 50, 20 years. Or same applies to textile and most of the food. um, Medium low technologies, still you see they hover around a lot of the most of the primary resources like agriculture or mining. Again, the the impact, or the impact of research and development in these fields on these industry is not so obvious. And the way OECD defines high technology is manufacturing involved in high intensity of research and development, right? So that's why, as per this classification, it's a medium low technology. And then, of course, medium high technologies. Now that's where the confusion starts. But then you see a pattern that that's something where things are really made and applied, and usually require some form of specialized knowledge. Uh, Examples like scientific instruments or motor vehicles, they do innovate, they do change over time. There is a serious degree of research over there, but still that's not the highest technology, at least as per OECD. And the highest degree of technology they consider are fields like aerospace, computer and office machinery for some reason, but okay. Many of these definitions are not updated over a long time, though this is indeed from 2012. But nevertheless, let's keep rolling with this. Electronics, communication, and pharmaceutical. So it's such a long list, too much text on the slides, but I think you got some idea that uh, what do they really mean with high tech and low tech. So from these different lists, I try to filter this thing to hopefully a simpler imagery. So aerospace, it is a high-tech industry. Just look up all the stuff from StarX to from SpaceX to ISRO. It requires great degree of research and development, intense research and development to improve your rockets and in general aerodynamics of airplanes. Computation in general, especially more focused towards newer algorithms or newer computational techniques. So it's different from just programming, which is a mature technology. But when we talk about computation here, we are talking about advanced computing concepts. Um, and we move further, electronics is largely is a blanket used for high technology because the products and the technology changes so quickly that what is high one day is low another day. And microfabrication. Now, this is a bit fancy term, but stay with me. Fabrication, as we do in all the industries, and micro means that is extremely small scale, one millionth of a meter, less than that, to make features on your chip or make circuits on your chip, which are of the size of which are of the size of uh, uh, the smallest nodes as they measure in microfabrication, like the smallest size they can make. It has already gone down to sub 5 nanometer. Now 5 nanometer is incredibly small. How small? um, 5 nanometer, when I say the node is 5 nanometer, that means they are making structures which are just 5 nanometer wide. um, the size of coronavirus is it ranges between, I think, 20 nanometer to 200 nanometer. So one third of that size. It's incredibly small size. It's a billionth of a meter. That's what 1 nanometer is. And all the integrated circuits, chips, microprocessors, they are basically built with microfabrication uh, industry. Yeah. Photonics. Well, I have a bias here because, as I said, this is what I studied. But I'm not the only one with this bias. Recently, European Union, almost 10 years ago, declared that photonics is the key enabling technology for 21st century. Many people say that its impact on 21st century will be as much as what electronics had on 20th century. Now, everybody buys that, but photonics is very important. How important? Well, to start with, it's a study of light, and all the internet you are streaming uh, in its path definitely goes through optical fibers, where all the internet signals move as light. So electronics manipulates electrons, photonics manipulates photons. And fields like laser, optoelectronics, diodes, uh, LEDs, these are also covered in the larger umbrella of photonics. And then, of course, biotechnology. Uh, Here, I've just used the one generic term. It includes things people research on genes, but also on non-genetic research topics, non-gene related research topics. And uh, Here I'm just using one umbrella term for that. And then advanced materials. Uh, what's advanced materials? So far we have been tapping from the materials which were largely acquired from nature, and then we the smelting or use the ore to extract whatever we wanted. But advanced material is when we engineer the properties of material at very small level. Um, Things which immediately come to mind is like graphene or uh, these kind of advanced materials. Graphene is a very good example where a very thin layer of it um, can tolerate huge stress, show unbelievable electrical and thermal conductivity, something which is which is not so easily doable with the material we usually work with in large quantities. So high tech is the cutting edge, and these are the top things directly used the industry which is classified as high technology. Um, I will skip this slide because I see that I have gone to I've gone way deeper than what I have promised. So I'll directly come to a case study and to this topic that what is working in high tech feels like. So just a case study to show you the complexity of or a typical workflow in a high tech industry. So let's just start from so the slide which I have just skipped, it talks about technology readiness levels, which means that how soon are you going to use that technology as an actual product? There is a big big time duration between when an idea is thought and a product is made. And that's the process which typically happens in high-tech industries where they're researching and developing newer technologies. So let's go with a case study. So it's called a glucose sensor. It's a wearable watch for diabetes. Um, uh, there are many projects like this around the world. I've been personally been involved in one of such project for such a product development. So that's why I chose this topic to explain how does it work. So wearable watch for diabetes. Uh, a person with diabetes can often needs to be informed immediately what their sugar levels are, because if they're gone too high or too low, they can even have a fatal situation. Usually testing for sugar is is an invasive process. You have to take some blood out or urine out to do that. So continuously sugar monitoring is a big challenge without hurting your body continuously. And that's the idea there. It starts with science, as I said. People notice that if you have some liquid and a particular wavelength, and to simplify wavelength of light as, let's say, just a color of light. So it was noticed that if there is a solution with sugar in it, if you throw one color of light into it, another color of light comes out of it. Well, not that dramatically, but let's say as a concept. It's an interesting concept found through science, and there the whole research about what this effect is called, how does it work. It was called Raman effect, what I'm mentioning, and C.V. Raman from actually won Nobel Prize in physics for this, and that's after him this effect was named. So anyway, this is the Raman effect. How can we use it to make something useful, let's say for healthcare? Can Raman effect test sugar in blood? Now, this is $1 million question to ask. If you're just putting some water with sugar and passing the light and detecting, that's an experiment. That's a very first level of research, very basic science. But the next level is to think that how this can be applied. Now, this is where engineering is coming into effect. So can Raman effect test sugar in blood? If it can, then it will be great. We just have to pass light through our blood and test if what kind of light is coming out, and that should tell roughly what is the sugar level in blood. Now, when you put it together as an engineer, then you will find that it requires so many subsystems. Nothing is invented at once. Mobile was not invented overnight that, okay, now we have a smartphone. No, its cameras were invented at a different time. Its touch screen was invented in another moment and at another place. But when these things are put together into a device, that's what engineers and technologists are doing. So this is I won't go into detail of this, but you can imagine, like, if you have to make a device which can check your blood with light, you will probably have a laser which shoots light into you, very low power laser, which shoots light into your skin, and then it reflects back, and then you use lens and everything to put that light back into kind of a camera, which can very accurately see if the light which went into your hand and came out reflected, how different it is. Now, after measuring that difference, this data need to be computed using a processor, hence the CPU. And then the same system should have enough software to analyze this data, use algorithms to do the whole analysis, display it somehow, and also communicate it to other devices. And you want to put everything into a watch, right? So you're wearing it, so your laser, camera, CPU, software, power, display, everything into one device. This is a transformation from a scientific idea, putting it together, and then trying to compress it, make it smaller and smaller. This is a small a flow of how innovative ideas come into existence. Now, if you analyze this thing again, you will see that the very first levels of research were actually from pure sciences, where spectroscopy or knowledge of organic chemistry was used to conceive the idea. Then the whole assembly thing and making a prototype that involved inputs from technology, engineering, and math, as we discussed. And then once you make a first prototype, it is usually extremely ugly and hardly works. So you have to go through many processes, bring in some designers who have some sense of aesthetics to put it together into a product. That is where high tech has its limit. And then it's when a product coming out of high tech is being developed for mass production, then it's no more high tech. That's the irony of it, because now it's massively available everywhere. Uh, but then to convert a tested technology into a product is still a big challenge. And usually engineers and technologists are very bad at it because they're good at inventing things and making it work. But to put together, you do need good designing, a good user interface designer. Uh, you need legal people because high tech and in general science, uh, legal disputes are very common. Like who invented what? Is this patent in my name or that person's name? Is that patent registered in America or in Europe? These kind of questions are very, very common. And especially if you are in healthcare, then there is one more legal problem where you have to have your products approved by local authorities. They should be tested enough. So there is a lot of legal material involved in high technology, and of course, marketing and finance that remains like for every industry a very important factor. So from this case study of one R&D exercise in a high-tech environment, you can already see that there are many different job profiles which are covered through in this whole exercise. So to conclude, research and development is interdisciplinary. Okay, well, not to conclude because I pretty much did not mention this word at all. Excuse me. Uh, One important thing you see that this whole creation of one watch which can tell your sugar level, it involves involvement from chemistry to people from biology, life sciences, healthcare, medical specialist, photonics specialist, electronics specialist, optics specialist, programmers, uh, and people working with power devices or with the batteries and design. So it's really interdisciplinary. Even if you take out the product development part of it and just focus on R&D, even that is extremely interdisciplinary. And and that is a very important point. If you want to remember one thing from this whole webinar, just keep this in mind. Interdisciplinary. We no more live in a world where being super specialist on one topic increases your career worth. Well, in many cases it does, but it's increasingly becoming evident that you should be ready to learn more about fields you had no idea about. Hmm. Because most of the industry based on technology, it's no more purely electronics, purely biological, purely biotechnology. These are all put together, like in this example. Uh, Moving further, you can already see there's a big diversity of roles which exist in high tech. I will go through some of the major classifications real quick so that I really put into words that what career options are there. Researcher. Now that's really the main core of uh, research and development in a high tech industry. These are the people who are usually from higher education in STEM, MSc and PhD. That's quite clear. And their role is investigator, which means, as I said, research is increasingly interdisciplinary. So once you join a post, it's not that you have to just go through these books and these web pages and that's your all work. No, you are in you're in an open ocean, and all possibilities exist to innovate or create something. Uh, we saw in the previous example where field of photonics works with field of organic chemistry to test something about healthcare. So if you're just a hardcore engineer, a hardcore technologist, or electronics specialist, it won't cut. You have to be investigative enough to go across different fields and do research and put them together. So that's what is expected from a researcher's role in a larger profile. And If you are a PhD or if you have done research-oriented MSc, then you are more than prepared for it, because then you know how to uh, seep through tons of information and find what is most useful for you. Then there is programmers are really taking over high-tech world, and I'm not talking about just IT. That's not I'm even at all talking about. Um, as I said, machines have started thinking already, and if you can make them think and you can automate them, you can get a lot of things done which would have taken a lot of expertise and manual work to be done. The example I gave about recognizing patterns to detect cancer. Now, these kind of things, these computers still need to be programmed. Uh, and for that, people with good programming skills and an enthusiasm towards applying new computational techniques to science and technology are really sorted. I can tell from my experience that well, most of the programmers do have background in science technology, but then I see that increasingly people who are from core programming fields, their expertise are being sought, because it's not so easy to have an artificial neural network in your lab to analyze something. You still need someone from core technology to do that. So programmers have increasingly popular role in high tech. Then in general, technicians, in the sense, people who are not dedicated to really innovate or find a new research, but just to maintain the facility and the equipments. Now, these equipments are not simple office building equipments. Most of the high-tech industries and labs have infrastructure which is extremely expensive and need extreme maintenance. And for that, uh, technicians are required who are specialists with certain kind of tools and processes to do it over and over again and maintain it, and make sure that the whole infrastructure of research is continued. And that usually does not require PhD, and MSc and BSc in technology and engineering is considered sufficient. Science and mathematics becomes too much of a pure subfield to have any applications right there. Most of the companies have their own training programs to teach people who are working on a very specific uh, research infrastructure of those companies. Then, of course, there are managers as everywhere. For well, managers, the first thing comes to mind is MBA. But in technology industry, people with background in STEM are really preferred. But it really depends. If you are really smart in understanding that what aspect of technology you are really trying to sell, and you are a good salesman, probably you do not know, don't need to have super specialization in STEM field. So legal, I mentioned before that it's very important, especially in the case of IP, intellectual property, and patents. And then there is a other set of career options in high technology also, like for administration, finance, marketing, and communication. Like every field, high tech industry also need this visibility. And just I'm not bombarding you with much of the data and statistics, but this graph I found particularly interesting. It's from US Bureau of Labor Statistics, where they categorized just technology industry, not necessarily high tech. And they found that only about 67% of people employed in technology industry had background in technology. About the rest of 33% tend to be from non-STEM fields and not working directly with technical aspects. So this is a big revelation, something to be kept in mind. So even if you do not have a STEM degree, but you do have passion for science and engineering, and you want to use your non-STEM expertise in that, there are ways and there are career paths for that. So I've came to the last slide of this presentation, where I have tried to put together some of the things which I promise I will not tell in the beginning, but I realize these are important. So just a large directions in this field. How to really qualify? to or generate a profile which can land you a job in high tech industry. So, well, but the default is that if you have a higher education in STEM, as we saw that usually PhD MSc is a good combination. Just MSc. Using the word BSc MSc just as a let's say placeholder for all bachelor's and master's degrees respectively. So when I say BSc, I mean BTech and BE or BR. Non-STEM degrees are also welcome, but it's always preferred if they do have some STEM background for obvious reasons. Like then they will know what they are selling, what they're defending. Critical thinking. It's not just clerical job where you have to focus in finishing something repetitively and be done with it. You have to analyze it and be critical of it. You have to find flaws in it and problems with that. And that in general as a critical thinking is very important um, trait one should have for this industry. Research orientation. Uh, Here, by research orientation does not mean a personal inquisitiveness for research, but people who tend to be attracted towards it. Like if many people tend to do projects during their undergraduation or their masters, these kind of things really help in profiles also. I see that if I see a CV which says that it did on top of their bachelor's and master's project, they have done additional projects. Those kind of CVs always get more preference because that shows that the person is ready to work in lab or start on a small, even if it's a 1 month project or 2 month project. These kind of projects shows research orientation and is considered a big asset when you apply for this tech, high tech industry. Programming skills in general for everyone, and adaptability quotient. It's something new. To be honest, I don't really know how to fully define it. I'm not even sure if it can be quantified, but it's you should be ready to adapt to new world and new technologies, new sources of information, and whole new paradigms. And how quickly and happily you can adapt to new systems, that defines your adaptability quotient. Probably people from HR can tell you better that how to actually measure that, but read about it. Try to be flexible and in towards your career. Be ready to make moves to change paths if required, and be very sociable and be a good team player. Not just as a cliche word, but really work together, because you have seen these projects require so many people from different fields collaborating together. If you don't know how to work with many peoples together, then research will not go smoothly. I know that there are employers in high tech industry who they also even checks conduct exclusive interviews to see whether this person will fit well with the rest of the group or people or not. Because if no matter how genius you are, if you're not working well with the group, not mixing well, then you will not be of any use for those domains. So if you have to build your career and you are still in your early educational days, yeah, if you are in your pre-university or in your undergraduation, then it's best to aim for technology specialized institutes in India, like IITs, IASC, Indian Institute of Space Technology. Most of them are government institutes, but some of the private universities also tend to have some decent research centers. Many of the major universities have good research infrastructure, often on some particular fields. Um, so those research centers are a good place to have your career sorted for high tech. And then government research institutes with more formalized way of intake, uh, like ISRO, DRDO, BARC. They are best we can have in India, and any experience there, working there, even for a project or doing your internship after your BSc or MSc there, that's really adds great effect, great power to your CV. And finally, industry. So unfortunately, we don't have uh, uh, any substantial high-tech industry in India. Large, but in general around the world, most of the big companies tend to have a dedicated R&D division, and that's the first place you would like to bet for if you directly want to go to the industry. There are many research centers also which are commercialized and privately owned. And earlier when I said that unfortunately that trend is not so big in India, it tends to be changing very rapidly. Uh, there are many government schemes where they promote startups on tech based. Many of the one reason we lagged infrastructure for high tech was because we were over reliant on our conventional industries and did not have technologies to really build an infrastructure like that. But now, for many research related activities, you do not really need to establish a $1 billion clean room or a very expensive lab there. A lot of things are doable with with just programming, with just analysis, with just even the whole field of technology consultancy is out there where people uh, without directly actually working as a researcher, but you can do your own literature review, you can do your own research about how this field is existing as per the other experts of this field and provide your consultancies to companies. That's an emerging field, especially in India. So there are multiple options for high tech, and this one last final word on if you want to pursue career abroad. uh, it's more tricky. It really depends where you want to go, but it's not really so much out of reach or so impossible. People tend to ignore the fact that there are lots of fully funded MSc and PhD positions available in Europe and also in North America. And I have seen that there is a big trend about Indian students doing their master's project in universities abroad. Universities tend to welcome these kind of moves because that brings diversity to them. And it's even if it's 2 3 month internship is not funded, then it's just 2 3 months. It will not cost that much. Most of the universities, they don't charge you fees to do internship over there. So if you are aiming to go abroad, then here I will just convince you that be assured there are lots of funded positions. The trick is how to find them. But industry funds lots of research in Europe and also in America. So there are big scholarships offered by countries and by embassies are often very highly competitive. But industry sponsored projects in Europe and America are relatively easier uh, to apply for and have your candidature presented for that. So all options exist. And with this, I would like to conclude this talk. And I think I have covered most of the bases. And um, if you have any question, just
Yes,
that's your
yes.
time.
Okay, so we are already running out of time. Thank you, Mr. Adil, for such a great lecture. I will now take you all to a 20 minutes Q&A session. If you have any questions, please write them in Q&A section below. I will take them one by one. All right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I will begin with our first question. How high tech help on getting jobs for laymen in this COVID-19 lockdown? Mr. Mohammed Khurshid Akhtar is asking this.
Well, I saw um, a post on LinkedIn, put in a good humor, that what brought IT transformation in your company, CEO, CTO, or COVID-19? And we all know what the answer is. Half of the world is working from home and realizing that a lot can be done from far away. So most of the high tech industry in particular is a knowledge intensive industry. It requires knowledge more than anything else. And with with the kind of connectivity we have, this is the time to prepare yourself, to get ready. Being locked inside the house does not really change much. And especially the skills you need for this industry are often, as I mentioned, things like adaptability. Well, okay, social being sociable is probably something you cannot practice right now, but programming and in general, learning about the topic, knowing the background, that can really help you and prepare you for this high-tech industry, irrespective of COVID or lockdown.
All right. So the next question is, what computer language is best to learn and which is used for coming years?
I will claim the ignorance on that because I'm not really a programmer. But I do see that there are many indications which rate languages based on how much it is used. It also depends on what. Now I'll talk only from high-tech point of view, high-tech industries point of view. I have people in my office who are working with Fortran, a really ancient language, very difficult to use, but they do work in that because they can write incredibly fast programs with that. And then there's a very large number of people who are largely working with Python. Why? Because they can, it's a open source libraries for so many things can be directly downloaded and used, saving a lot of time. So it really depends from specific field to field. In general, I will tend to say that Python is a very good language because it is used a lot in R&D and in scientific community, and that is why it is used a lot in high-tech industry also, because the same people from universities, after using open source libraries from Python, which are so easily available, extremely popular, when they move to high-tech industry, they continue to use Python. One more language I will mention. So if I have to mention one language, that would be Python. But then MATLAB has also a very big presence in science and technology community. And the reason is again the same. It's incredibly nice language to do a lot of formulations, which are, it has very strong libraries and toolbox for different purposes. So MATLAB also, but Python, yeah, I think that's one language if you want to learn, it should be that. Uh, Humera, can you hear me?
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, now I can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, Mr. Ashok is asking how Industry 5.0 might look like.
Well, the big question is if we survive until Industry 5.0, and provided we do not throw ourselves to extinction, but no one knows. Well, take this for example. If you take any sci-fi movie which you really love, especially from 1980s, because that's what I love, the way they have imagined future is absolutely different from what actually happened. Once AI, how will you define Industry 5.0? If I have to do it, I will probably say that that's the day when singularity is achieved, which means artificial intelligence becoming as smart as humans are. And then what happens is everyone's suspense, imagination, and fantasy. Anything can happen. I don't know. Matrix-like scenario. Well, that's kind of a fear mongering, but lots of beautiful things can also come out of it. But hard to predict. So I won't comment more on Industry 5.0.
All right. So, artificial intelligence, data science, and machine learning are interrelated. So, how should one go about exploring their specific interest in them and find resources to further them?
So by specific interest, I assume that you want to ask that if you are in a particular field, how can you apply AI or big data on that? Now, that is the most interesting part, I think, of big data and application of AI, because every day newer applications tend to be coming out. I gave an example about recognizing the cancer patterns, but then there are many uh, as fancy examples. For example, one way it is used a lot in retail sector is when big supermarkets issue these loyalty cards or numbers. So every time you go shopping, you sign off using that because you get 5% discount or something like that. But if you're doing grocery on very regular basis, it keeps seeing your the big data applications in Superstore maintain and watch what is your buying behavior, and on that basis they can push their advertising to you through letterbox or offer you special discounts. So that's a case where something which is as conventional as retailing is finding an application in it for AI. So how to really um, find or how to train yourself for that, I'm definitely not the right person to ask about that, because there it starts going into a really you know more computer science domains, and i I don't know much about that, frankly.
Yeah. So next question is machine learning important to work in current work?
No, not really. I mean, it's
Oh,
becoming more and more important, um, because in many projects you are expected to use libraries regarding machine learning to train. So the example which I gave, which was regarding making this sensor for your glucose detection. Now they're training the data for your program is very, very important. The data need to be trained that what kind of light will come out of blood for what different concentrations of sugar. And it is not linear. It's not like that if there's more sugar, then more green light will come out. No, it's quite complicated. And that's where machine learning applications are there. Now, when we had to do it for our project, we already could find a whole library where we can train our data, which means we take solutions with known quantity of sugar, pass light through it, take the spectrum, and tell machine that for this sugar, I got this kind of a spectrum. For this level of sugar, we got this kind of a spectrum. And after that, the library could, the network could pretty much accurately predict that what level of sugar is there for what kind of a spectrum. Now, how much machine learning we had to learn for it? Well, I'm just talking about a specific project, like
okay.
not really.
Excuse
Just
me. I'll just say that another 5 minutes we have, and to end the session. So let's be very quick and specific. I'll take two more questions now. Uh, I think this is it. Okay.
okay.
Yeah. So what is the scope of pursuing masters in engineering management?
Um, I don't think it's particularly useful for high tech, because in engineering management, especially what I understand about that degree, it focuses more on conventional industries and their setup, while in high tech it tend to be changing very rapidly. And courses like this, which are not specialized for STEM, but more oriented towards management, are not the most ideal qualifications for jobs in STEM. Of course, it is useful if you are aiming for a managerial career in STEM or in high tech.
Okay. So can you throw some light on blockchain technology and how can blockchain technology be useful for the industries?
Oh, again, it's out of syllabus question for me, but
Okay.
its use are beyond just cryptocurrency and all. One big example is from open source community's point of view, and I will just give one major example, is where registry keeping for public viewing can really be ensured by using blockchain, ensuring that the whole concept of how blocks are added for the blockchain, and maintained and copied over multiple servers. So things like where, for example, land deeds, people owning property. Now, if your paper is burned, it's gone. Is that end of your property? Not really, because you have a backup on the computers. But it is still not really fully secured or fully unchangeable directory. But while blockchain indeed provides these kind of facilities and how it's to be used, it can of course also be used for encryption and decryption. But that's where my knowledge about blockchain runs out, to be honest.
All right. So this is, I think, many of the questions they are out of the topic. So I'm not going to cover them. We'll now quickly wrap this up. So I'll thank you, Mr. Adil, for such a wonderful, informative, and interesting session today. I'm sure all have enjoyed it thoroughly, and I hope everyone will take this valuable knowledge from today's webinar and be benefit by it, inshallah.
Thank you
So
for
again,
giving me the
yeah,
opportunity. Yeah.
thank you, Mr. Adil. All right. So now, if anyone wants to join AMP, you can click on the link you all can see on your screens. It was really great to have you all with us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Adil. We will now
Thank you.
take your leave now. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, Adil bhai, for
Khuda
such a
Hafiz.
wonderful session. And the questions which have remained unanswered, inshallah, we'll be sending it to you via email. So
Okay,
whenever you have
that's great.
time, you can respond it back to them and we'll send it to the participants.
It'll be my
Pleasure to
pleasure.
have you all on board. Thank you so much. This is Sheza signing off from you. Thank you.